Guys, welcome. We're going to start the podcast here. We're going to be talking a little bit about BDO and some of the things that are going on. I'm joined here by Mr. Choice, Mr. Biceptimus, two of the biggest guys in the game. If you guys could give a quick introduction, that would be great for the purpose of the YouTube viewers. We'll start with Choice.
Yeah, for sure. Top. Yep. What's up? My name is Choice. I play Berserker. Been playing Black Desert since it came out on Steam, and I am working towards basically just hard capping my character.
Biceps.
I guess it's me next. Hey, I'm Biceptimus or Sonny, and I've been playing the game since release on NA, and as you can probably hear from the accent, I'm not American. I come from Denmark. I live in Denmark. I've been playing on NA for over 7 years now, and I am playing our warrior main, and I am working on my second set as well for gearing. I've hard capped out my DR set, so I'm working on the last piece of gear from my evasion set at the moment. And then I'm also doing alchemy.
I did hear about that. Well, first and foremost, thank you so much for joining me. This was a little bit short notice. I really appreciate it. We're all in like different time zones, I believe. Thank you guys.
Yeah.
I will leave all these guys' links in the description below. Please go check them out. They're both of these guys are on YouTube as well as Twitch. Please check them out. Today we're going to try and keep this relatively short. And by short, I mean no longer than an hour, ideally. I want this to be a little bit more digestible. And we're just going to get right into this. There are four topics that I would like to talk to you guys about. They're kind of popular subjects. Those four things are going to be the Marni Realm changes, the Guild Dec Changes, the KR Cron Stones / outfit changes, and crystals breaking. That nothing has really changed, but we've got an event going on right now. So that seems to be a popular topic, and I would love to get your guys' thoughts and opinions on each matter. Feel free to tell us how you feel in chat. If you guys are watching this live, you can see the chat going next to Biceps below Choice there. So let us know. Your messages will be shown on the YouTube channel. Let's get right into this. Marni Realm changes. We're going to start with that. The Marni Realm changes. Who'd like to start? What do you guys think?
Yeah, I could start off. So Marni Realm changes. Basically, they're changing it where the Marni Realm can now be used every other hour. I kind of think that this is a really good change overall. It's pretty dramatic. A lot of people in NA saying that this is going to like kill open world and stuff like that, because now people are kind of going to be in their own little instances a lot more often. However, as you have seen recently with the big influx of players, I feel like for the future growth of the game, you're going to have people that are able to simultaneously grind at the same spot at the same time on the same channel, because it can get really hectic to find spots when you're having to duel all the time. So I feel like this is a future change, right? Like as the game continues to grow, there's going to need to be more areas to grind, or else everybody's going to be competing over very limited resources and honestly not enough resources. So I kind of like it.
I totally agree. I think the Marni Realm increase was bound to happen. I'm personally a bit surprised he didn't go with the same system like Agris, where you like build it up. You could get 5 hours max, but you like stack it up. But actually going with like a 1 hour on, 1 hour off, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with the open world. I think that's the main concern that people have with this, is the idea of taking people out of the open world and the shared space, which is something that, like, it's a very single player oriented MMO. You can do everything on your own, pretty much. You never rely on other people. But seeing other players in the world, everywhere you go, going out, running into people, that still gives you this like MMO feel, the shared social interactions and everything. I think that's what people are concerned about. But with how many players there are and how it's going to be like 1 on, 1 off, I think it's probably going to be just fine, honestly. A lot of the changes where people have been concerned, like with the fast travel being added, was pretty much like put to shame over time. So it's probably going to be fine.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of funny though, because I've seen a lot of people complain about, oh, it's going to feel too single playery now. But it's like, I don't know about you guys, but my experience with BDO, the one thing most people bitch and complain about is people taking people's spots, contesting spots, right? It's like everyone's it's like the one thing that triggers the most people. Like I don't know, I don't think I've ever met anyone that was like, oh yeah, this dude is coming to contest me for my spot. Yeah, let's duel for spot. Let's actually it turns into it always turns into a toxic situation. So I'm like, yeah, I don't think it's gonna really affect it, but I can definitely see how some people wouldn't like the fact that it might feel like it's turning even more into a single player game, because you're right. I think Biceptimus mentioned it is a very single player game, but yeah, I mean, I feel like we're pretty much in agreement with this one. I don't know what you guys think in chat. Let us know, but I guess this is kind of a short topic. We could go on.
I do think,
yeah.
However, just a quick note,
Please.
that I think this here, just to keep it in mind, I think the change with the Marni ties into some of the other changes we're about to talk about. So I think that one of the reasons Jay is doing this, the Marni one on like adding more time to it, is gonna tie into the other stuff with the war declarations and things like that. Just want to keep that in mind when we get to that topic.
Yeah, and let's use that as a segue to that next section, the guild deck changes. Now, this is really big. For those of you who don't know, I'll quickly explain this. In Black Desert Online, you join a guild, and when you join a guild, you can declare war on other guilds. Now, when you do that after a short period of time, you are able to kill those players. Again, generally speaking, I'm going to really streamline this, but you can kill players from that guild at no penalty, at no cost, and they can counter that war declaration, but systematically it doesn't make any difference. The only thing that changes is the fact that when you counter deck the guild, you can also now see how many kills you get from that guild, unless they've changed it. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's essentially how it works. So if you're in a guild and then some other bigger guild declares war on you, you're just kind of subject to that. And they've changed it so now that both guilds have to essentially agree and deck each other in order for that guild war to take place. Biceps, why don't you talk to us a little bit about this in your thoughts?
Yeah, right. So it's there is a lot of emotion on the subject.
Yeah.
Like a lot of emotion, because I actually just have a video on the subject about to come out like next couple of days. We talked a lot about it when it first happened.
I'm just going to interrupt you right there. I will get that link for you guys. If you're watching this video, I will link it in the description. So as soon as I get it from Biceps, that'll be in the description. Please check it out. Sorry.
Oh, don't worry about it. But yeah, so one of the things that we talked a lot about on the stream was the different point of views when it comes with the war deck. And there is so a lot of people that love this change because they feel like they are being grieved and killed by people, and the other side of this conversation hates the change because they feel like they're being grieved by the other players coming into the grind spot and grinding over them. And I like told a nice little story about, like, I think we all heard these kind of conversations and stories from people where we have a guy that, like, oh, I walked into a grind spot. I was there for like 5 minutes just killing some mobs in a corner, and this dude with the 11 million gear score comes in and just two-shots me, and he just corpse camps me, and now he's spawning me at node and everything, and just ruined my entire day. And you've also heard the other story of a guy like, oh, so I start grinding, and this griefer comes into my grind spot, starts farming over me, and now he's karma bombing me. And it's like, it's the same story. It's the same two people interacting with each other, but seeing it from different point of view. So the differences with the change with the war decks is to protect the newer players that is probably not aware of the rotations of grind spots coming in, and then just all of a sudden being killed without knowing what's going on. And that's where I think a lot of people are super happy about seeing this change, to make it less punishing for new players to suddenly be in a guild as a guild war. They farm people and they spawn camp others. Now they leave the guild and your friends quit the game. And on the other side of it, I think this is where the Marni stuff comes in, where the people that feel like they're being grieved, well, they can just go in Marni Realm now. I think at the end of the day, all of these people, they just want to grind. They just want to play the game, and they don't want to be interrupted.
Very true.
This is also why just go on Asha doesn't really work, because the people that are grinding off Arsha and just grinding and are feeling like they're being griefed by people coming in, well, they just want to grind. They don't want to go to the PvP server because they don't want PvP. So I think that's where like a lot of the emotion comes from, that both sides actually feel like they're getting griefed by the other side. So I think it's going to be pretty fine, especially with the Marni Realm coming in. So you can just grind there, you can go in, and if you want to have guild fights, GVGs, you can do that. And if you just want to grind, you now have more Marni Realm time. There's more channels to do it, and I think there's going to be a less hostile environment. And I think it's going to be fine again. I know there's a lot of people that are like, oh, it's going to be the death of the... I don't think. I think it's going to be fine.
So I definitely want to hear Choice's take on this, but before I do, I would like to get some interaction with chat here. For those of you who are in chat, I would like you to type X if you are not in favor of this change, meaning you want the guild decks to remain the same, and type O's in chat if you are in favor of this change, the new system. Choice, your thoughts?
Yeah. So my thoughts on the subject is that I personally do not like the change. Now, there's a particular reason why I don't like the change. And what Bicep said was absolutely true, is that it's both sides of a coin. On one side, you have very high gear score players that are going to be very mean to lower gear score players in these situations that maybe don't know what they're doing. And then the other side of situations is there's lower gear score players that are essentially griefing higher gear score players by, grinding on top of them and doing what they're doing and messing up their rotation. Right now, BDO has a very interesting ecosystem and etiquette when it comes to like grind spots. The etiquette is that when you are approaching somebody that's already grinding there, you ask them for a duel for spot. If you ask them for a duel for spot and they accept that duel, then you go and you duel, and the fight is done in a couple of minutes and the problem is resolved right away. And everybody goes about their day and gets to go and grind. And the person that loses can hop channels, ask the next person, and it's sort of just like a trickle down effect. I personally don't really ask people to duel for spot, quite frankly. I always am the type to wait. But that is a very quick and clean way for players to determine how are we going to get this problem resolved as quick as possible. If somebody does not really obey that etiquette and they're like, no, I don't want to duel for spot, war decks are kind of like the only way to enforce that etiquette to the point where grind spots can be resolved grind spots disputes can be resolved in a very quick way. Without the ability to resolve these disputes, I feel like it's going to be really, I don't know, if you've played this game, Bicep, you've had to deal with the fact that there's going to be spots where it's the war of attrition. You are sitting there for an hour and you're just farming over this person that came into your rotation, and you're just you're getting really upset because you're wasting an entire hour of your grind just grinding over this guy, and there's nothing you can do. He's not respecting the really defined etiquette that's already existed in the game for years. And it's just like it's the person that's going to be the most stubborn that wins, and everybody wastes their time. Duel for spots are not a perfect system, right? Like, geared players are going to win the duels. It's not perfect, but it is a very quick and clean way to not waste people's times, and war decks enforce that etiquette. With no etiquette, it's going to be, I want to say there's going to be so much more of that war of attrition where you're just really going to have two sides of a camp where they're just really upset with each other, grinding over each other and being like, I'm never leaving, I'm going to stay here for 2 hours, and nobody's going to win in those situations. I feel like, yes, the bad side of the war decks where you can deck on a smaller guild and kick somebody out of a spot is bad, but I feel like the alternative, like having no alternative for teaching a newer player like the duels for spot etiquette or the spot resolution etiquette that already exists in the game, and not having any repercussion for not basically learning that etiquette, is going to end up with a really, really annoying system. And yeah, I'm just not a fan.
I 100% agree. And it's not just a couple of hours. I've done it for days, actually.
Days?
Back in the day in history. Yeah, it's for days. I remember like one of my guildies. I told the story before. One of my homies back in the day, he was getting griefed by somebody. I spent 2 days standing on top of his corpse in history until they talked it out and became friends, and then went back to grinding my rotation. I spent 2 days not just standing on his corpse. So I totally get it. I've been there. It's absolutely annoying. You feel like you're completely wasting time. I just don't know, and this is where I feel like we probably don't have as much info, but I don't know how big the percentages is of the people that where this is an issue versus the people that come in and just feel like they are getting completely griefed out and hunted down and ruining the game experience and just basically log out and never log back in. So I feel like there is like you can still do, of course, the duel for spot, and I know, and so do you, right? That the etiquette about these kind of things are very different region to region. Maybe I'm also biased about how it's going to work out because I obviously am a Asha enjoyer a lot of the time for the exact reason that you're talking about, Choice. Where if people don't want to duel for spot or find it, well then I can just fight over it. I don't even have to wait for a guild deck, right? So I'm interested in seeing how it works out, but I'm not super doomsayer about it.
What if they added more Arsha servers?
So it's actually one of the things. Yeah, I think it would be great as well. I think even Arsha Light. Yeah. They could even add some Arsha Light servers where there was no penalty but also no drop rate. Like basically Arsha but without the drop rate. I could see that being like a middle ground solution as well for some servers like that. But also just like a couple more Arsha servers would be pretty good too.
So you think, yeah, so Biceptimus, you're in favor. Choice, you're not a big fan of the thought of more Arsha servers. Tell us why.
Oh, definitely not. I mean, if you go to Arsha right now, there already is very limited amounts of competition over the grind spots. Like Arsha is not really a super popular place to grind. And quite frankly, if you added more servers that didn't have a drop rate bonus and just had like open PvP, I fail to see who would ever bother going there, because right now you can just go to Arsha right now and get 50% drop rate and mostly be unbothered. So I don't really see what the benefit of like a server that has no drop rate but just has like unregulated karma system. And it also, because the PvP is already somewhat scarce on Arsha, it would just further like dilute that pool of players that are trying to maybe grind, maybe PvP, instead of like funneling them all into one server to maybe create PvP like it's supposed to be. Then it's going to be, I just think like it's already, you can run around the world on Arsha right now looking for someone to fight, and you're going to find varying degrees of success instead of a full server of people that are like, yeah, I'm trying to grind over something that's really worthwhile to grind for. Because like the drop rate buff, it comes down to if somebody messes up your grind for 5 minutes, that drop rate buff is basically not useful anymore. And that's why most people grind off Arsha. So all in all, I just think it would dilute the pool of players, and instead of putting them all in one place, it would just dilute that pool and make it even harder.
What if they made the incentive?
I think it's actually complete opposite.
Okay.
If I just may,
please.
I think it's actually the complete opposite. I think a reason why there's so few people on Arsha is because people expect there to be a lot of PvP and expect it to be crowded with people like you and me, Choice. So I bet if we ask in chat like how many don't even think about going Arsha even though they would like it. I think having a bit more channels, so you realize as a player that the chance of somebody just looking for PvP is going to be finding you and fighting you is a bit less. So those people that would want to go somewhere like that are the ones that just want to grind, but also be able to defend their spot if somebody comes in. Whereas the people that go on Arsha right now are people that are either super geared and can defend it, or people that are just looking for PvP. And that means the players that could benefit and be interested in grinding on Arsha don't even bother. Even though, as you're saying, it's free a lot of times. So many grind spots are open. But I don't think it's because of people not wanting to. I think it's because that you have an expectation of when you're on Arsha, you are at risk of getting PvP because the people looking for PvP will go there. So adding more channels, I think it would actually get more people to be on them.
Right. So what you just said there is that more people are going to go on these PvE, PvP servers. Where do you think the PvPers are now going to go? They're going to go to those servers. They're going to go to the same servers where there's more people to fight. And then all of a sudden, they're all going to get griefed in their grinds by people that are just trying to PvP and not PvE. And that's exactly what happens in cap node wars, right? You have uncapped guilds that drop on cap node wars to mess with the capped guilds. You're going to have grinders on a PvP channel that doesn't give drop rate because they're like, oh, this is great, I can defend my spot if it happens. So let's say that there's 200% more people on that channel compared to Arsha. You're going to have people from the top end guilds that are like, oh, there's nobody on Arsha. I'm going to go to this PvEVP server and I'm going to go mess with some random PvE guy. And it's not going to take long for that all to fall apart. And then none of the channels are going to be populated and it's going to be even further diluted. So it's like it's the domino effect, like maybe originally, like initially, but in the long term, the PvPers are always going to go where the mass majority of the players are. You can't make a unrestricted PvP server and not expect there's just going to be a ton of people that are trying to PvP to go like mess with the PvE grinders. It eventually will just fall like dominoes.
I don't think that's that many people that are looking to like run around and just kill them from like higher guilds. I guess we just have like a different view of like the distribution of those kind of encounters. But no, like I don't think it would be nearly as bad.
So Arsha was one of the things. Unless you want to add to that choice, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I have people in my guild all day, and they just run around Arsha looking for people to fight. There's going to be those same people that if they can find the people to fight on these PvEVP servers, they're going to go to those PvEVP servers. It's not uncommon. You're going to have Digi members, you're going to have Cho members, you're going to have Corrupt members, you're going to have Crawling members. Like all the top guilds are going to go to these like unrestricted Karma servers to fight people that are trying to grind. And I think that it would just eventually lead to a negative overall dilution of having too many PvP servers. I would be more in favor of add a server group that is purely PvE only. That way there, all of the players that really do, like they just do not like hitting that spawn at node button can grind over each other until they're red in the face and really see what the new system of what BDO can become without a war deck system, and let them just absolutely spew at themselves until they realize that having the etiquette of a duel and a deck system is way better than the salty grind on top of each other situation that can occur in BDO.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong, but maybe we're also just old jaded veterans. Like I don't know how bad it is in season. That's basically like that on season, right? I mean, you can guild deck, but there's a lot of new players that aren't in guilds or anything like that. Like, I don't know how bad it is for season players with grinding over each other and all that.
Mm-hmm. So,
and that's basically the PvE server you're talking about, right? So
Arsha
I think a lot of people would love that.
Yeah, so I love the fact that you guys have differing opinions and viewpoints on this. Arsha was something that we just brought up as a talking point / potential solution to this. Obviously, you guys have some differing opinions there. What about let's move away from Arsha for a second. What would you guys think about systematic changes? So, these changes are to protect newer players. The perspective of the new players that Biceptimus was mentioning earlier. What about have you guys put any thought into like a systematic change within guild functions, maybe tiering certain guilds and allowing certain guilds to place decks on other guilds that fit a certain criteria? So, for example, Choice, your guild would not be able to deck on my guild unless we reciprocated it, because my guild is just a bunch of Tuvala Timmies. But your guild decking on Biceptimus guild, that will go through because you guys are pretty much on the same tier. I don't know how that would work. Obviously, they would have to put it in some systems. They would have to have some systems in place there. Have you thought about that type of solution?
Kanon, that is honestly a great idea. That already
Didn't they do that one
exists.
on global?
It already exists, Canon.
Oh, there you go.
Okay.
If you are in a guild that has not participated in a node war, and you are in a guild that has not sent out a war deck or received a war deck, you are a passive guild. You cannot be decked by any guild that has ever participated in a node war for that week or has war decks active. It already exists in that way where non-war deck guilds, non-node war guilds can only deck non-node war guilds. And the only restriction to that, right? The only reason that would ever not occur is if you decide that you are going to deck some other non-war deck guild or another war deck guild decks you, then you can become deckable. But if you already exist in a guild that is quite passive, you would have to piss off somebody in their already existing non-war deck guild to make themselves vulnerable to a deck just so that they can deck you. Right. So there's already
There's a lot
kind
of
of this
deckings
weird
going on here.
yeah, there's this very weird ecosystem that already exists where if you're in a passive guild, like a life skiller guild, they are very sensitive about sending out war decks because that makes their guild vulnerable and say, hey, we're PvP ready. But for the guilds that are already PvP ready, they cannot deck those non-PvP ready guilds that have not already sent out decks or participated in Node War. So there already is a system to some degree that does protect the smaller guilds or the guilds that are just interested in doing life skilling or grinding or stuff like that. So that already does exist to some degree. And I don't know, like I do think that it's a good system overall. I'm not sure how they would create some sort of like power disparity between the guilds, like because here if you did that, right, let's say that you create a system where it somehow averages out the gear score of each member and gives each guild a gear score average, and only within certain ranges can you deck people. You're gonna have 760 gear score players that are going to join an average 680 gear score guild. And because they're amongst 50 other low gear score members, now they just get to deck whoever the heck they want and farm whoever the heck they want. Like 760 gear score, you're not going to compete with somebody like that, no matter like how many people you have at 650 gear score, right? So I don't know if there's really ever a perfect solution to getting players to be able to grind without receiving PvP from a war deck, unless you either A, completely remove the war deck system, like it's basically kind of what they're doing, is making it consensual wars where it's only two guilds that agree upon it, or you just add in a whole server group like Serendia server group and make that PvE only, and that gives players an outlet to go and grind somewhere, right? It's very two extremes, but I feel like any variation of the extremes in the middle is going to create just different opportunities for abuse. And it's not going to fix the overall problem. It's just going to create a new one and fix an old one. So it's got to be really one or the other. And I'm more inclined to think that I think it would be better if they added a PvE only server group for the players that truly just get bothered by the occasional bad experience that they're going to have with a war deck.
Yeah, so that was what I was referring to. They actually tried what you were talking about, Kanon, on Global Lab, where they actually extended on the system that is in the game right now. So that was what I was referring to, where you on your guild you could have like 4 different classifications. So you could have a warring guild, and you could go to war. You could go to node wars only if you were classified as a warring guild, and you could receive and send decks. But you could also be a life skilling guild. There's like 4 other different categories of guilds that you could choose to be. And that had certain limitations and benefits depending on that. And that's like a long time ago now, and never heard anything from it since then. And I think obviously they completely scrapped the idea. So this is what I think.
Roll that out.
What?
They did roll that out. You can classify what your guild is, but it didn't really. They didn't have anything like happen when you classified it. It was more so they like created
the idea of having the limitations attached.
They just made it. They made it for more recruitment purposes. So
it's like an RP factor now or something like that.
Yeah.
But this is what I think that PA is probably looking to do. As much as I think like at this point here, like a PV server, I think it's again I think I don't think me and Choice really disagrees on anything here. Like we both agree with all the intact. I think it's more like the levels of them, how it's gonna affect things.
Hmm.
But I think that PA is looking to more or less go away from the open world PvP outside of agreed upon stuff, and then putting a more focus into the organized PvP. Maybe like the arena, maybe other systems where you sign up for it and you opt into the PvP with other people that will opt into it. Like the 300 versus 300 they're looking to do. I think that's going to be a bit of the focus on that, and then let people gear up and play the game, and then go into a PvP setting when they want to PvP. I feel like that's the direction that PA is taking the game,
Right.
which is interesting because that's completely. Well, obviously, like Node Wars and everything was part of the game from the beginning, but at least for me, one of the things that really like got me into BDO was the cutthroat open world PvP at any time environment. But obviously, over time, they have to scale that back because of the like self cannibalizing effect that it has on the player base. Makes it so much harder for people to come in. Imagine if we're still to this day blocking people off with guilds to go to world bosses. And like you lost the penalty, you lost the XP if you died in PvP and lost crystals. I mean, they had to scale some of that back, but I think they're going like even more in that direction nowadays, making it more mainstream and more approachable.
That's definitely true, and it is more of a niche thing for sure. Because like when I first started the game, my most fondest memories were grinding at Sawsons, and all of a sudden a war deck would break out, and now your guild of say you have maybe just 6 people that are going to show up, but so does this other smaller guild, and you just get to fight with these people over this grind spot. And like those war decks and Pirate Island fights and all that stuff, they're definitely like rose-colored glasses, like say those are the glory day type of thing. But that's definitely what made me motivated to get more gear in the game, because I didn't want to ever lose that duel, or I wanted to, be stronger for my guild. So to me, like those war deck situations were like a motivator, but I also understand that for the casual player, they don't think like, oh, I just died. Time to grind 1,000 hours so this never happens again. Like that's not the logical reaction that most people are going to have, right? So I get that there needs to be systems in place to protect players that are just trying to have a good casual time. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I do think that by completely diluting the entirety of all 40 whatever channels there are by just like messing up war decks completely, I'd be more in favor of adding a channel group that is specifically for players that just like season servers. No PvP, no war decks, just let them play. They can go from season to Serendia, and they can just live in sunny Serendia their whole gameplay. Like something like that, I'm totally fine with.
Choice, do you think the Marni Realm changes is going to have a significant impact in this change?
Yeah, there's already going to be a very big net positive effect with the Marni Realm, and especially the 5-minute hop cooldown on the level of people willing to just have that really, really passionate grind on top of another type of like grind spot to try to mess somebody up, right? Like there's not going to be as much of that, because it's very inconsequential to be like, oh, I don't have to wait, because in the past it was 15 minutes. I don't have to wait 15 minutes to hop anymore. I can now do it in 5. Or, oh, my Marni Realm's up anyway. How much do I really want to prove a point to this person that just decided to interrupt my grind by grinding on top of me? So I feel like a lot of people are going to be a little less stubborn about their willingness to swap channels, or just join a Marni Realm in the first place. So those two changes in general are already going to cut down a lot on the situations that we're talking about. The war deck change is just like really pushing it over the edge.
Right. So I do want to move on to our next subject here, but I want to give you guys one more opportunity to add anything else to that subject, the guild deck changes, if you guys would like to before we move on. Anything else you guys would like to add?
No.
I think I've said my piece.
Perfect.
No.
Let's talk about the Cron Stone / outfit changes. Now, Choice, you and I had spoken about the pay to win stuff and all that stuff that Asmon reacted to during our last podcast. I want to talk about these changes because they're pretty significant. And last time I checked, costumes, just like how Biohack predicted, I believe, They're just sitting on the marketplace. No one's buying them. However, our region hasn't even gotten the other the tier 2. Let's just call the recent changes the tier 3 changes. NA hasn't actually gotten even the tier 2 changes to the costume prices. And I want to hear your guys' thoughts on this matter, because this is a pretty significant thing. Pay to win ties into it a little bit, but more so just the general economy and the general marketplace of BDO and how things are purchased. Choice or Biceptimus?
I just want to say,
Go for it.
is it my Discord that's lagging crazy? Both of you guys are falling out constantly.
Let's get right into this. KR Cron Stone changes, outfit changes. Like I said before, I'm not going to repeat myself. Biceps, would you like to lead us with this one? Your thoughts?
Sure. Well, it's first off, it's as you mentioned or touched on briefly, it is different with the value increase on the costumes because of Korea already being higher. So there's like two things going on right now with the costumes. One, well, actually, there's three things going on. One of them is the absolute terrible timing of doing this, especially with the history of page winning BDO, and then people seeing the costume increase and being like, "Oh my God, look, increasing page win." But the costume increase, that's the second thing going on, it's costume increase. That's nothing new. They've done that like 5 times, I think, now. Basically because they have to. Since otherwise costumes would still be 53 million silver. I think that was like the starting cost of them. Nobody would buy them, nobody would sell them, and they need to, well, they want to make money, right? So of course they're going to adjust the prices with inflation. And one of the things that I know a lot of people probably don't know about is the way the PA has always done it. They adjust prices to match roughly the old adjustments in terms of inflation. So we're talking like how much silver power you're making versus how much a costume costs. And they always do the adjustments to catch up to the inflation. So far, they've never done it spearheading the inflation. So it's not going to be a big deal. The price increase is pretty much whatever. We've seen it 5 more times or 5 times in the past. We're going to see it again in the future. If they don't do it, well, inflation in the game, people make more silver power, etc., then nobody's going to buy and sell costumes. So that's like one of the things. The other thing that's new, well, it's not completely new, but it's done in a different way this time, is the increase in price of the vendor Cron Stones. And that's obviously following the increase, the average silver per Cron Stone increase on costumes. So for anyone that's unaware, it used to be 1 million silver per Cron Stone on costumes in NA and EU. And I believe it was 1.35 in Korea. And then they changed it over time with some adjustments. And right now, you pay 1.35 million silver per Cron Stones if you're buying a costume with silver. And in Korea, I believe it's 1.65 before this change. Now, the change makes the costume Cron Stones 2.2 million silver each, which means it would be cheaper to buy vendor Cron Stones, so they increase the vendor Cron Stones accordingly. Now, vendor Cron Stones used to be 1 million silver, so they have been increased, but they did adjust the Cron price at that point, so it's basically a net nothing. It's very interesting, but I don't think it's really anything crazy that they're increasing the price. I know people view it as making the game more pay to win, to incentivize people to buy costumes more, but there's a lot of other ways they could do that. They could literally just increase the silver drastically and make them even more like spearhead inflation and all that, and make them even better value to buy. They don't have to increase the silver per Cron Stones. So what I see with the silver per Cron Stone increase is, again, ties into inflation, I think. For example, when Deboraka necklace came out, was added to the game, I remember Biohack, among other people, did some math on it. And I think if you were enhancing the Debos for profit, it was around 500 million silver power grinding Ass Forest, enhancing 10 Debos. And that was like the best silver power you could do at the time. So when you actually look at the expected time investment for a person grinding and getting Cron Stones to enhance a Debo, then you make way more then a 50% increase compared to the price you're looking for. Let's say you're looking for the vendor Cron Stones, 2 mil to 3 mil, that's a 50% increase. You're still technically better off with that change than when the item was first introduced and the price on it was made in terms of cost of Cron Stones. So I think it's more a change, again, minded on inflation and slowing down like in-game progression instead, rather than there's like so many other things they could do to just increase the value or the incentive to swipe. But yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, Choice, what are your thoughts on this? Because I think the pay to win aspect of it is one thing, but I think the bigger picture here with this change, because like Biceptimus said, inflation is a thing. It's just there's no way the costumes can't eventually increase in price. It's just the way it is, right? People are going to get more power. People are going to have more grind zones. People are going to make more silver per hour. So obviously inflation is a thing in this game. That's going to go up. I think the bigger concern here is how it affects the marketplace and everything that surrounds that. Costumes not having any value, and just people raw tapping the upgrades rather than actually purchasing the costumes. And I think we're actually seeing that already happen in Korea. Choice, what are your thoughts on everything?
Right. So realistically, like Bicep he was mentioning how this really breaks down into two parts. Okay.
Right.
So you've got the costume prices increasing in silver value, which is expected, right? That is something that like a couple of months ago, I was saying, man, it would really be great if they increased the prices of costumes. So that way more costumes would get listed and therefore they'd be more accessible on the market. But the part of it that I don't agree with, and the part that I will never agree with, never have, is why do they continue to make Cron Stones more expensive as a ratio of the costume purchase to the extractable value of the Crons? It used to be, like Bicep said, it was 1.062 before million per Cron. Now it's 1.352. And now it's going to be 2.2 million per Cron. And now they're making vendor Crons go up to 3 million. Why is this bad for the game? Okay, so this is bad for the game because this means that the relative value of all items is going to rise over time. And this also means that the value that previous players extracted from Cron Stones are now like really value, like the value that you have in your Cron Stones that you've ever used are just higher now. Because when you're a new player and you come into the game and now all of your upgrades are going to cost 2.2 million per Cron, whereas in the past, my Cron Stones have always cost 1 or 1.3 million per Cron. That is a negative because that means that as a legacy player, I benefited off of that, whereas a new player is not going to get to benefit off of that. Not only that, but now that Crons are more expensive, the cost of items are just going to go way, 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 way up. So the black stars that I have are now 100 and whatever bill. They're going to go up to 200 billion because the cost of making that weapon just got extremely more expensive. And that is a negative thing. So inflation in Black Desert is great because if you put in 100 hours of effort 6 years ago, you cannot just ride out that 100 hours of effort 6 years later and say, look, I still have significance here. And that allows new players to come into the game and be like, oh, I'm not 10,000 hours behind somebody, because those 10,000 hours that person has put in over 6 years has had varying degrees of relevancy in today's day and age. So when you start playing the game now, you're able to make a lot more money compared to what you used to back then, which allows players to catch up a lot easier in the game. And it doesn't allow players that have put in a bunch of effort a few years ago to continue to ride that high. You have to continuously put consistent effort into Black Desert to stay relevant, which is great because that allows a new player to come in and get relevant very quickly. And this change completely goes in the opposite of that by making Cron Stones more expensive. It means that the past effort that you had put in to get that gear in the past, all those Cron Stones, now is worth even more, just very artificially because of this change. So I'm not a fan of them raising the ratio of crons received from the silver price spent, but I am a fan of them raising the price of the costume's silver value to list on the market to keep up with inflation. Hopefully that was concise enough, but I did like ponder on a bit there. But yeah, definitely not a fan of the Cron Stone ratio increasing, a fan of the silver price increasing.
Yeah, the silver, I mean, it just has to increase. I really don't feel like there's much to explain there, but it is the Cron Stone issue that's what's really changing, or it's got the attention of a lot of people, and it is the reason why we see all those costumes. I believe it's the reason why, right, chat? You guys could correct me if I'm wrong with this, but I believe it's the reason why the Korean marketplace right now is the way it is. Is there anything that you wanted to add to that, Bicepts?
No, like I pretty much agree. I think we all agree that the two subjects are like they look like they're combined, but they're not really. But people that maybe don't know the context about the price increases historically might think it's one big thing. It really caught me with surprise as well with the base Cron Stone increase, but I'm not completely in agreement that it doesn't. With what Joy said about they're still putting like more value on the stuff we did when we got up here in Black Stars. Like we weren't grinding for 1.2 billion silver an hour. And also we still have the debos to go for, right? So I see it also as a way to slow down people like me and Choice going for debo earrings right now and debo rings in the future. And by the time the newer players that are starting to play recently are at the point when they're going for the debos, the game is going to look quite different. The economy is going to look different. I'm not surprised they're going to do it, especially, well, the alternative would be, of course, to change the Cron Stone price on items like the debo earrings or the debo rings whenever they come out, or future items. We do have like a lot of stuff probably planned. I mean, they're already releasing the boots this year. That's the first time to do two Fallen Guard items in 1 year, right? So I have a feeling that they probably have like further progression planned, and they want to slow down the end game a bit. I understand it also does trickle down, like obviously with Black Stars might be a bit more expensive. But I think for the most part, like the Cron Stones in BDO, you can do a lot of progression in the game. You can get your full armors, you can get C20s, C10s, right? Turn them into Fallen Guards, enhance them up to do without even using a single Cron Stone. PN accessories accessible on the market. So it's not like it will affect people as much. Well, it will, right? But it doesn't have to. For a long time, people that are trying to catch up to the end game. So the people at end game that are going for those debos, well, we are using Cron Stones because we have to.
Right.
So it will slow us down, and I do feel like it's not completely one another. I think there is some middle ground here where it does affect the end game as well, slows those down, and I wouldn't be surprised if the math turns out to be a bit of a catch up. It slows us down more than it slows the people catching up down. And it's just a different way of doing it instead of speeding up the low progression.
Right.
Getting more catch up, giving more gear, getting full pin out of Tuvala instead of Chet boss gear, etc. etc. So
if it's slowing us down when we're going for one item, how is it not going to slow down everybody else that needs a full wheel of items? It's going to slow down the new player way more than it's going to slow us down when we only need one item.
Yeah, but they don't need to use Cron Stones on the full wheel.
Well, I think that's not true. You got Libresca helmet, you need Fallen God armor, you need Dawn's gloves, you need Black Star on all three types, every expensive accessory, and you currently use Cron Stones on, and think to the future, right? Current accessories might be worth only 110 bill, but when Cron Stones now go up in price, now these weapons or these accessories are going to go up in price because the perceived Cron value is the Cron value is much higher, so therefore the input cost of making that weapon or that accessory is much higher, so that's just going to push up the price of all these things. I think that this is not good at all for a new player, and that's exactly why I'm against the ratio changing, is because I do not want players like me and you who have already put in 2 million Cron Stones into their gear to benefit off of the prior price of the crons. I think that the game should continuously move inflationary so that the effort that we put in last year, the year before that, and the year before that gets continuously devalued. And I know that that sounds bad, but that
No,
is
we 100%
important.
agree with that.
That that is important.
That's a must. If
To,
that doesn't happen, the game
Yeah.
like it's just GG. That has to happen.
Exactly, right?
So that's
So
what I'm
you
saying.
need
Like,
to
I think
continuously
the
inflate.
silver income that people are doing has already like done that a lot. And when you say that people need the full wheel and everything, well, at that point they are sort of at the game. You have to remember the distribution of people. I think it was like, was it 5% now that was 700 gear score? That's still kind of like the in game, right? That's like 95% getting there. You don't need Cron Stones. Sorry for Narcs. You don't need it for a lot of the other items, Crescents, Velterra belts. You don't need Cron Stones all the way up to do Falling Guard. It's only for Try and Ted where you're going to need the Cron Stones. So that's what I'm saying. I don't think it's going to affect the average player as much with all the other systems they put in place in terms of progression options. Of course, it will, but I don't think it's going to be... It will be a big change when you are here in it. But if you look like further back, I don't think it's going to be that big a relative change with how much people are making and probably will be making with the constant changes to the grind spots, the new stuff coming out, etc., etc. Don't get me wrong, I think it's really weird. I was not expecting it. I would probably prefer it. Also, I don't think we will get it here in NAEU because I think it would completely not fit into where we are at the moment. But I don't think it's going to be, again, as bad as you'd think. I think it's going to be, less problematic when you're looking at the price increase, right? So here's like, first off, it's not like a 50% increase in terms of price because it's a 50% increase in terms of vendor cost. But as you already see on Career, with the current prices, they're sitting hundreds of costumes, which means you can expect a price of 2.2 million silver, which is a 10% increase over the vendor cost. So if EU can now get those, then it's relatively not that big of an increase. A 10% cost increase is not even close to the silver power increase that we've seen even in the last year of BDO.
So, Bicep, we agreed on the fact that inflation is good for the game because it allows new players to come into the game and compete with the old efforts that we put in the past, right? We agree on that?
The level that we, like, of course inflation is needed, but it doesn't have to be hyperinflation, right?
Right. But we agree that, it's generally a good thing. Yeah. So if new player, like, we agree on that, right? So tell me how making the ratio of Cron Stones, the making it where Crons are effectively more expensive per, like, making it where Cron Stones are 2.2 million each compared to 2 million each, let's just say. That's a very small, modest 10% increase. How is that good for the game if we can agree that the efforts of past should not be weighed more than the efforts of future by making the Cron Stones of past cost less than the Cron Stones of future? It's like a complete opposite. You're arguing completely opposite points here. It's either past effort is not worth as much as
it's
current
because you're looking
future
at this like as an all or nothing thing. So in the past, they also increased the price, right? Choice, you know this. Of course, they increased the value of the costumes from 1 to 1.35, right?
Yeah.
The game didn't die, right? It's not a big deal.
It didn't die, but it was not good for the game.
Also,
it was not good that they increased the ratio, the cost per cron for the costumes. It should have been left at 1.06 or 1.062 million silver. It should have been left there. It shouldn't have gone to 1.35. Okay, Nothing bad happened, but it should have never happened.
So you wanted to like just only pay 1 million per your double taps and all that? I mean, okay, so if they don't adjust that stuff over time, right, it just means that they are locked into the cost of, say, a demo. Let's just use that as an example. It could be a disto or whatever. Which means that the progression gets hyperinflated. Like, progression is good. It could be faster and faster. But we have more and more people starting to hit hard cap. If the Cron Stones were still 1 mil and let's say they just increase the silver costs a lot on costumes, but people still sold them, right? Then, well, it would just be that much faster on top of making more silver. So we already have inflation in people grind and make more value, grind faster. That could be because of artifacts coming out, class buffs, etc., grind spots being buffed, new grind spots. So you already have inflation on one hand with that. That doesn't mean that you then have to accept and not curve inflation in other areas. You still have a total inflation going on in the game, and it isn't a universal bad thing to then reduce some inflation. It doesn't mean that there should be no inflation, but you are basically adding two different inflation factors together and being like, well, because one level is good, then the other one must also be good. And that's what I'm saying. It depends on how deep the inflation is, and there are plenty of ways where you could reduce inflation. And this is one of them. Another one could be to make people just make less silver power, reduce trash from grind, and that would not be very fun either. And then you would still have because you grinded here in the past, you made more silver, so now you get more value than I do now, right? So it's not just because inflation in general is good that all inflation at all levels is good as well.
Yeah, but you're saying that the ratio stays roughly the same because we're making so much more silver, right? And in the future, by the time when the new player gets to that point...
The ratio is still, if you compare to when the Deboraka necklace came out, the best silver power was 500 mil an hour. That's not the best silver per hour now.
Yep.
People that are
and that's a great thing.
So you already make more silver, and then relative to the hour invested into it, even with the adjustments of 10%, you make easily double the amount of silver now. So there's still inflation. It's still a lot easier getting things now than it was when we did it. But, right, it's just a bit less so.
It definitely is a bit less, right? It's absolutely true that by making Cron Stones have a higher value per Cron as per what they're extractable from a costume, definitely lowers down the overall inflation, which we agreed was good for new players. So that means that this change is bad for new players.
No, it doesn't. There's still inflation. All inflation is not good. It doesn't. Let's say that tomorrow they made a patch. They updated everything and they 10x'd all the trash you got from all the mobs. Every single trash in the game now was 10x. Would that be good for the game?
So hyperinflation is not good.
Okay, so we agree there is levels to inflation, right?
Yes.
So that's what I'm saying. It's not less inflation. It's just reducing the inflation. It doesn't mean negative inflation. There's still inflation in the game. With that increase, let's say we got the 2.2 million, which I don't think we will. When Deboraka Necklace came out, it was still relatively more hours you should expect to spend in terms of silver than it is with that change. That means it's still relatively inflated in terms of value you make, even with that increase.
See, but I don't think we're maintaining the relativity, actually, because 6 years ago, we were making 25 million silver an hour, and now we're making 1.5 bill an hour.
That was when I played.
Right. That is a lot. That's a lot of inflation, and we've already agreed that lot of inflation is good. This change.
And we didn't agree a lot.
We've already agreed
we don't
that
agree on the level of it.
Yeah, but the inflation over time, right? If we just stop right now and today, right, just today, do you think that PA has been handling the inflation of the game just fine from then till now?
Yes, but you also have to remember that they've increased the Cron Stone value over time. So that has been part of the combating the inflation. That has been since the start. Cron Stones used to be 1 million from the vendor. Yeah. Then they were 1 million from costumes. Now they're 1.35 million from costumes. Right? So yes, I think they've done a good job, and I think the Cron Stone value ties into it. Now, I think this is very important, and I think this is why when I'm probably talking a bit past each other, Choice. I'm not saying that this change is good. I'm not saying that I like the idea of going 3 million vendor crons. But I'm saying it's nothing new, and it's something that they've done over time, and I don't think it is a universal bad thing. I'm talking about like finding the right level of making these changes. And if you apply the 2.2 million Cron Stones from costumes with the 3 million vendor to NAE right now, I don't think that would be good. I think that would be too much. But I think applying the 1.65 million would probably be totally fine, and I don't think it would be an issue at all.
Yeah. Okay. I hate to do this, Kanon. I'm sorry that this is going to be something that's going to be like a long, like drawn out subject, but I need to just attack this in another way.
Please do.
Okay with that.
This is interesting. I love
Guys, the floor is yours. Listen, I want you guys to know that the Twitch chat is very engaged. This is great YouTube content. The floor is yours, guys. Go for it. I'm listening.
Okay. So if we're gonna say, right, this is I'm gonna wrap this up into one really simple example. The reason why this is bad for new players and good for veteran players when Cron Stones raise in price is because the amount of crons of value that we already have in our gear versus what they have. If a new player has a Tet Black Star, and that is the highest level of gear that they have, and they have put in 5,000 Cron Stones into that particular piece of gear. Those 5,000 Cron Stones used to be worth 1.35 million each, right? So they put in 6.7 billion silver into those Cron Stones. And now, all of a sudden, those same 5,000 Cron Stones, let's say it's valued now at 2.2. They're now, those Cron Stones, just overnight, just from sitting there, just from logging in from one day to the next, are now worth 11 bill. So artificially, that gear just got far more expensive just because that player was sitting on that Tet Black Star. So now let's scale that up to somebody like you and I who have used 2 million Cron Stones. We have used 2 million Cron Stones, which has cost us billions and trillions of silver. And now all of a sudden you're going to make those Cron Stones worth 2.2 each. Now our billions and trillions nearly just got doubled. The perceived value of our gear just got doubled because we have put in so many crons in the past. And it's not going to happen overnight. But because of that change, now everything is going to slowly tick up more and more and more on the marketplace because now the input cost of making that gear has just gotten more expensive, which is going to make your gear, my gear, everybody else who's ever put in effort in the past worth way more money to make, which is bad for a new player. And so we have agreed that hyperinflation is not good for the game, but inflation is good for the game. I don't want them to inflate endgame players' gear. I want them to inflate the amount of money that we make per hour so that the old effort that we put in, the active hours that we put in, are worth less in the past than they are in the future, which creates a competitive environment for a new player to come into the game and catch up to an endgame player. I don't want them to inflate the trillions of silver worth of gear that I already have to be worth multi-trillions so that it's even harder for a new player to get the gear that I have, because that's anti-competitive.
I completely get what you mean, Choice, and we agree. But I think where we differ is that. Let me explain, like with your example, and why I totally get what you're saying, but I think you're blowing it out of proportion. Because let's take our gear, and let's look at, and this is what I mean. Like it's about finding the levels. I'm not saying that the 2.2 is good, but I don't think it's an issue in that direction. So let's take the trillions of silver that we spend on our gear and look instead of the silver value, then also in the hours we put in at that point. Let's say we spent 2,000 hours, just throwing a random number out. Even with the change, and this is kind of what I'm getting at, even with the change, let's say we get it and it's all that, a new player wouldn't have to spend that amount of hours. Even though the value went up, you make so much more silver while grinding and playing the game, and the new options are there. So it might only take them 1,000 hours. Even with that change. Obviously, I'm making like it's very, the numbers are obviously pulled out of my ass, but you get the idea, right?
Yeah,
so
I know.
Sure,
I get
the silver value goes up, but I mean, we don't have anything to spend that silver on. I think that's another thing. Again, like, this is more trying to my understanding of why they might do it, and I'm not really like, do I agree with it? I don't really know. But if you just hyperinflate the progress in the game, you run into another issue in terms of the game development. That now you have, instead of 2% of players being you and me and hardcapped and waiting for the next content to come out and the next tier of gear, now maybe you have 10% of the player base slowly creeping towards that. And in a game that's like based on infinite progression, it kind of makes sense to slow down that not slow it down relative, but like at the end game, when you have the choice between then raising up the other players, which they've done historically all the time over the years, and then once in a while they've made some adjustment to Cron Stones, and I think the game was totally fine after it. I don't think it was a big deal. I think that's why they are probably doing it now. It is for those reasons, to maybe slow down the end towards the hard cap. But I still think that there has been a lot of inflation over time. Even with that change, it's not gonna take people nearly as long as it would us. That would be like not Gundler. Oh, what was that mage from? Gundle. Yeah. Right. How much time did he not have invested in his gear and all that back then? And like the game progresses past it. Even if he had trillions of silver in his gear back then, the game will also progress. And it's not like they're not adding new things. You see the silver people are making with the, I don't know if you saw the Thornwood edition, the new lantern spots, there's new debos, we got already a new expansion coming out. Who knows what that's going to bring in terms of fail stacks and values on those spots. The game is constantly moving. So even if here and now today, it might be a bit much, like as a game company, they have to also look for next year and those expectations, right? In terms of the progress and the cost. And again, every time they've increased the price, it hasn't really been a big deal. Like people that play the game now, started now, they didn't even know about it. It's just is the way it is. And you can't deny that starting now and progressing now is a lot faster and a lot easier to get to 700 gear score than it was back in the time when it was 1 million Cron Stone per costume.
Yep. Yeah, I still do not. I get what you're saying, right? You're overall saying that even. So can we? I guess we can't really agree on that. I don't know how we're gonna get past this.
No, I think like as Charles, I think we actually agree. I just think we disagree on the level of it and the impact of the level of it. Because we both definitely agree it should be always easier for a new player to come into the game, and
Definitely.
they should never have to invest as much time as we have to get to where we are right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, 100%.
And I definitely think that it's anti-competitive to increase the value of crons, given the millions of crons that you and I have used in our gear. It's going to make all our gear go way up in price.
And yeah, I think we're 100% agree,
10%.
but the thing is, that's for me, I see that's in a vacuum. If you also look to how the game has changed otherwise in terms of the silver people make and the progression you make in the game, then I don't think it's as big a deal. And I don't think it's as much of a hindrance because of how the game has also changed in terms of value making.
Yeah.
But if it just it was like it added it, that's what I'm saying. If you add that now, I don't think that's good, because I think this is not an okay time to add it on NA and EU. But again, Korea is a bit. I don't entirely sure. They're still a bit ahead. The values are different than they are here. Kanon Stones were down to like, I don't know, 2 million silver. You know, on NA they're sold out at max. So like, I don't think they should do it here. I think it would be really bad if they did it on NA and EU this year. I think increasing it to 1.65, that's more in line with the inflation, while still being super inflated in like how much silver you make, even with that adjustments in the cost of the upgrade.
Yeah.
So
all right, I guess we agree on the overall outcome, but we don't agree on the ways to get there, I guess.
I do want to add in one little thing, and then we'll slowly start to wrap this up. What did I want to add in? Hold on, I wanted to add in something. Hold on. Oh, that's what I wanted to add in. I think, yeah, that's what it was. Sorry, just brain fart there. NA, EU, and KR, they're a little bit different though. So earlier I referred to it as like a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, just again for people that are brand new to the game or watching this that don't know, to just make this a little bit easier to digest. The let's just say right now in NA there is a silver and Cron cost, tier 1, okay? In KR they are a tier above that. It's more expensive. Okay, those are all the numbers that these guys are throwing out. Tier 2 cost, right? In KR, they are rolling out a tier 3 cost now, where that price now goes up another tier. Okay, NA never got the tier 2 cost, but KR is about to get the tier, or they just got the tier 3 cost. Let's talk about that as the last segment of this, because NA hasn't even gotten that tier 2 cost. Is this something, of course, we need to talk about this, speculate, give our opinions on it, but is this something that might be completely irrelevant to us? Are we just going to get tier 2? Are we not going to get tier 2? What's the deal here? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think we'll get the tier 2, but I don't think it's irrelevant, because if we get the tier 2, well, then we'll get the tier 3 next time, which might be a year, it might be 2 years, who knows. But as I said earlier, I really hope we do not get the tier 3. If we do, then I'm totally. I think that's a bit too much. I'm way more inclined to agree with Choice then. That I think that's pushing it way too much. They need to do it proper, which they've done in the past. It's been fine, and in the long run, it's potentially been good. I don't really have anything to say one way or another, but I feel like the game is pretty fine. They've been good at curbing. But if they put the T3 in NAEU, I think that's going to be way too much. Way too much.
Biceptimus,
I think we'll probably get
Biceptimus, on that note, do you think NA is ready for tier 2 though? Or do you think tier 2 should be rolled out later for NA?
I was expecting it towards the end of the year, even before we heard anything about KR, anything. That would just fit in. Like I felt like maybe, November, December, something was my expectation all year, that we would probably get it then.
Gotcha. Choice, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I also think we're probably going to get the tier 2 version, but I will maintain that I think it's a bad thing. And I think that the most concise way that I can explain why it's a bad thing is that Biohack is going to go to bed the night before that patch and wake up 1 trillion silver richer. That is the problem. It's valuing the old Crons more, and because they become more expensive in the future. It's a problem when endgame players are benefiting heavily off of the increase in Cron Stone price, whereas that has zero effect on a new player and just makes things more expensive for them. So I will maintain forever and always that Cron Stones should never raise their relative value per Cron. It should, for now and forever and always, be 1.35 million per Cron. You can raise the price of costumes to 5 trillion silver, but you better make sure that those costumes are giving like 4,000 crons or whatever the ratio is to maintain. That is what I will always maintain. And I think even a tier 2 version is the wrong step. A tier 3 version is absolutely ludicrous. And that's my final point.
Gotcha.
Maybe I should clarify. I don't actually disagree with this. I don't really think it's because PA is not going to do that.
Yeah.
So I totally get it. Like they should do something else, but they're not doing that. So that's more like why. That's why I think that's why we're having the conversation.
Yeah.
Because they're just not going to do that. They're going to do the change. It will happen. I don't see them doing anything else. So I think it's more interesting just discussing what that means.
So if I may interject, please correct me if I'm wrong, because what I got out of this, and keep in mind I am paying attention to chat and going back and forth, so I could have definitely missed something. But I feel like what I took from Biceps is his take was that he's obviously not in favor of tier 3 coming into NA. He's just expecting it to eventually come, and it's just a matter of when it comes, and the purpose of it coming is to slow down progression generally. But the timing of it coming in or out, that's, and Bicepps, I feel like you actually did make a good point in saying that maybe it does have something to do with development. Maybe development sees that there are way too many players at the end game that are going to run out of content, maybe, and they want to slow it down. Things that we can never know. I feel like that's the take that you gave. That's how I understood it. And chat, feel free to disagree, agree, but I thought it was pretty clear on my end. I feel like I don't have to reiterate Choice's point, because I feel like that was super, super clear. Is there anything that you guys would like to add to this before we move on?
My last final parting thing, I guess, is that players reaching the end game means full pen, Fallen God, Libresca, Dawn's gloves, Ator shoes. Those items are right now perceived as unattainable items. They are there's like less than there are fingers on your hand in the world. And that means that, yes, of course, slowing down progression is going to slow down players like myself and Bicep from reaching the end game. But we are considering the end game to be TET. The way that PA has always made the goalpost move backwards is by making bigger future items that are unattainable. Back when Deborek and Necklace came out, nobody touched it. But now it's a common thing. Same thing with Pen Fallen God. Nobody touches Pen Fallen God. It's going to become a common thing. It's not just slowing down progression for the entirety of the player base by raising the price of crons in any way is slowing down new players far more than it's slowing down endgame players. And that is the opposite of what I think is healthy for the long-term progression of the game. So I don't think that PA is worried about slowing down players so that, oh man, too many players are reaching the end game. They're probably looking at it and like seeing, oh wow, you have 2 trillion or 3 trillion silver worth of gear. A Pen Fallen God's 4 trill. You don't even have that. All of your gear combined is not even worth the price of this item. So they're looking at it thinking that eventually players are going to be able to achieve Pen Fallen God, whereas right now it's just a dream. So I think that they should continue to move the goalposts of progression for endgame players further by adding things like Fallen God armor that eventually, as inflation happens, makes those items more attainable, gives people something to work towards, while simultaneously making it simpler and faster every single year for a new player to get into the game and try to catch up to the relative value of the gear that we currently possess. Same thing with like making like the upgrade from a Tet to a Pen Fallen God very minuscule, right? It's minuscule so that a player that has less gear can still compete. So all in all, I will, there's never going to be an argument in my mind that could ever make raising the relative value of crons per Cron Stone good ever.
All right. I think that's a solid conclusion to that segment, unless Biceps, you wanted to add anything to that?
No, I think we touched on all of it 3 times now.
Yeah, awesome. And I appreciate that, guys. So I did have one more segment here, but because this has gone a little bit too long, I don't want the YouTube video to show like a 2-hour timestamp. I'm just going to ask very quickly, so let's not actually discuss this. I just want to at least ask it. Otherwise, people will say I didn't deliver what I said at the beginning of the video. The last question is crystals breaking. Right now, there is an event going on where your crystals don't break, and people are talking about, hey, why don't we make this a permanent thing? So maybe we can discuss this later if it's something worth discussing in the next podcast. But for now, let's just get a very quick one-word answer. Should crystals break, or not should, but would you prefer crystals to break and leave it as it is, or would you prefer crystals to not break? Let me know what you guys think in chat as well. Type it in the chat. Choice, we'll start with you. What do you think? One-word answer. No context.
It's funny because Bicep and I disagree on this, so it's not going to be simple, but I don't think crystals should break. Crystals should not break.
Okay.
Yeah. We actually had this talk when we were grinding Olin's like a couple days ago, and I don't think we necessarily agree. I was just like, I wasn't quite sure how it was going to affect like with the cons of removing it, but I've actually completely changed my mind on it. I am fully for not breaking crystals anymore.
Okay.
Well, let's go.
Like I thought some, yeah, I know. After our talk, I thought some more about it, and also Big and Shiny's post on Reddit was great. And I actually just completely changed my mind. I think they should remove crystal breaking in PvE. If they want to do like some other system where you can protect your crystals, whatnot, fine, whatever. But if they were to just announce that they were going to make this event permanent, I would be like, yeah, that's great.
Awesome. Guys, that's gonna wrap things up for this podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed it on Twitch. I hope you guys will enjoy it if you're watching this on YouTube. I want to give a special thanks to my two guests here, Mr. Choice, Mr. Bicepts, the two beasts of BDO. Guys, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. All right. So, guys, I am going to try and do a weekly podcast and invite two guests. I would love to invite Choice and Biceps. I don't know if they'll have time. I will definitely talk to them privately. Let me know in the Twitch chat and in the comment section if you guys enjoyed this, who else you'd like to see. Even if you'd like to see Choice and Biceps again, let me know in the comment section. Get that engagement up. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And please go and follow these guys on Twitch. Massive respects to these guys. They are extremely helpful, whether you are a vet, whether you are a brand new player. They're extremely helpful. They're amazing. They're very entertaining to talk to. Please go check these guys out. All their links will be found in the description below. We'll see you in the next video.